You ready? Okay. So I am going to call the Economic Development Commission to order. Today's Thursday, May 11th. First item on the agenda is to approve the minutes from April 13th. Are there any comments, changes, additions?
Move the approval of the minutes.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So moved. Update from Mr. Cook.
Sorry, let me just, like we're short a clerk here, so that was, David, you moved the minutes and,
Tom, seconded.
second, okay, good. One thing to draw to your attention is that this evening at Henry James, there's an open meeting that's being hosted by Deepwater Wind. Are you all familiar? Have you all heard about this? This is, for those of you who haven't, Deepwater Wind participated in a tri-state request for proposal. Massachusetts and Connecticut in particular, we're looking for proposals for advancement of alternative energy sources. Deepwater Wind put in a bid with this based on placement of a very large number of solar panels out here on land that's currently owned by Griffin Land.
And that's the parcel off Holcomb.
Yes, that's right. So this is from a town control standpoint, we have very little in this case. This is a project that's large enough to be basically run by the Siting Commission for Connecticut, not by us. When it comes time to construction and permits and things like that, that kicks in. But we're not really in a position to say a yay or nay to it. So that's just sort of some background on it. That said, it's potentially a real revenue source for the town. It would utilize the land for this purpose for probably 20 or 25 years. They in talking with us, their plans include ways of helping to actually regenerate the soil, which it needs. But it might very well be a revenue source without additional housing, without additional children for schools. There's some positives for it. The real question is whether or not they can do a nice enough job with the implementation to make the impacted neighborhoods happy. So that open house is tonight at 6:30. They're there to answer questions and to provide details on the project.
Tom, there's no connection through our land planning group then, eh?
That's correct. That's exactly right.
That's by state law?
Yeah, and it's just given the scale of it all. So
Was it 175 panels?
that's right. It's a total of over 280 acres.
Right.
And as if you go tonight, you'll see in drawings that they are the acreage that they're using is the lodgeable acreage of old farm fields. I mean, it's they would probably end up taking some trees down.
Is that taxable to the town then?
Yes,
Yes.
there is both tax
Oh,
on
they
the
didn't
land.
forgive them the taxes, I know.
What's that?
This ordinance or whatever it is from the state, they didn't give tax forgiveness.
No, it's so.
They give them a subsidy?
Nothing of the sort. They have approached us about the possibility of an arrangement for taxes, which it's way too early to get the detail on that. And but that's at any rate, it could be quite significant for the town. So that's one piece. Another accomplishment for the since we last saw you is that with the great cooperation from Sarah and Main Street, we now have a community events page with a direct link on the front page of
Thank you, I
of
noticed.
the website. It's terrific. The important part was it got the town out of the business of screening things, which we can't do easily, and we've sent out information and will continue to send out information through our news and announcements and in contacts with different businesses and organizations just to to drive all things community to that page, so that becomes the
And the listings are incredible. We have pages of listings.
yeah. Has it increased a lot since, yeah?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's, the only other piece, of course, is that we continue to try to put together a budget as our state government is in free fall. And that's been something of a challenge. I know that both the Board of Finance was looking for, basically telling the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen to prepare for cuts based on any one of a number of potential outcomes from the state. Those, I think, plans are in place for both organizations to take out $1 million from what we currently have. But the reality is that at this point, no one has the faintest idea what they're going to land with. I know that the first selectwoman and other municipal leaders are pressing for a plan, just some plan, which will take something. It'll actually take communication on the Hill, which isn't happening right now. It'll take getting everybody to the table. It is a significant financial problem, and as far as any of us can tell, there's been no real attempt to quantify the problem and to figure out what resources we need to bring to bear on it. I think if that were done, first of all, we'd see that it's really, we'd see just how bad the problem is. Maybe that's why we haven't seen much of an approach on it. But I think it will end up calling on a lot of different resources to solve if they ever get there. But that's that hasn't happened yet. So we're doing the best we can to prepare for an unknown future, and that is the next event in our world is a Board of Finance meeting on May 16th. I think we'll, the theory right now is we'll take whatever direction we have, whatever guidance we can from the state, and we'll do the best we can to pass a budget.
Are the capital improvements that are slated to happen in schools and municipal buildings on hold, or they
No.
go forward because of the way they're
They're still
approved?
going forward right now. That's the Board of Finance at this point will make a call on what goes forward and what doesn't. So that's, but yeah, there's some fairly significant, there's certainly one very significant project on the capital plan right now. And that's the Henry James renovation.
Right.
And I think for example, the Board of Selectmen's proposed cuts are some from capital planning, but also some from the Board of Selectmen budget. A positive development in that arena is that we negotiated a shared services agreement with Bloomfield. We desperately need help for our building official right now. We need a deputy building official. That comes, of course, at a price, and we tried to recruit a part-time person. That didn't work. So we've got a full-time person in the budget. But as of Monday, both the Board of Selectmen and Bloomfield's Council approved an agreement that we negotiated with them to share the services of that person and mitigate the cost increase. They're in the same boat we are. But that's the kind of thing that we're always looking for at this point is reasonable ways to regionalize and share resources. Some of the things that people think are obvious tend to end up being quite expensive and challenging. This was one that was, I think, pretty easy. This is a layup, so let's just hope it stays on track. And that's what I've got from our world.
Revaluation's ongoing,
Correct.
and that's supposed to be wound up at the end of this year?
That's right. In the fall, I'm sure.
The group that they've hired, and I don't know the group, but usually they give some flavor in the presentation. I don't know if they made a presentation to the board or not on how they're gonna assess the different parts, like the residential, the condominiums, personal property, two others, I guess, that go in there, and how they see the juxtaposition of those in relationship, not with numbers, but in relationship to each other. Did they do that when they came before the board?
They did not come before the board. A request for proposals was sent out, a number of responses were provided. Dave Gardner made a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, and the board approved that recommendation, so.
What was the basis of the judgment to select this one then?
Of cost and quality of service. So it's a reputable firm that's used throughout the state, and they came in significantly lower than the other bidders.
You know what I'm looking to hear, and I'm not hearing it, but usually that's what's done. You have a flavor for how they're gonna view these 5 component parts, you know? Whether one's gonna go up and one's gonna, not with numbers, but just how they view it.
I can't say that we have that, David. At some point we can ask
Would
David.
Jeremy know that?
Jamie?
Jamie, yeah.
With regards to that, I've been involved in a significant number of revals, and I have yet to have a firm that I've been involved in retaining tell me what the results were gonna look like before they were undertaken.
That's the risk, Dave.
I think it's potentially very misleading if someone starts to have a discussion about what's going up and down before they do it. There are trends statewide and nationally, that's a very broad discussion, but in some instances, it's very premature to have that discussion at a local level until they delve into it. They're all professionally accredited, they have to follow standards and procedures and generally accepted practices. And they'll delve into they really know what the trends are when they start to dig into the sales values versus what the assessments were, what the reality of sales are, and what those adjustments are. And that affects commercial, residential, and industrial properties. And then within residential, you have single family, attached, detached, and then multifamily, and also your condo units. So, but again, in my experience over 28 years is that that discussion in some instances is extremely premature and gives some people a false sense that something may be different than what the perceived reality is.
I'm curious, just on a technical point, when you're entering into a shared services agreement and this happens to be a brand new hire as opposed to one town kind of renting out, so to speak, something that they already have, is the individual hired by one town and then
Yes.
the other town pay? Okay.
Right. This is I'm a recovering attorney, as many of you know, but I was a labor and employment guy for a long time. We have this person would very clearly be an employee of the town of Simsbury.
Okay.
So I think it probably is the sharing of the expense, the salary.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Cost sharing.
And we've done this in some form before. There was a period of time where our IT staff was servicing Canton, and that's no longer here. Frankly, they can barely keep up with us now. So the world's changed a lot. But
I think it's a great idea. I mean, I think it's very economical to do that.
we will have to start seeing
Yeah.
more of this.
It's going to spread people thin, but
that's correct. But
you have to prioritize.
Right. It allows us to flex a little bit, and from our standpoint, to have somebody, if in fact we see the kind of development that's in the books actually coming online.
Henry can't keep up.
The
permitting process.
And Henry is the dean of building officials, and we're very, very fortunate to have him, and we need to keep him.
Well, and it's not just new permits from a residential standpoint. From my background, the lenders are having stricter requirements on sales, and permits that were not pulled for a basement that was done in 1975 have become a major issue. And so all the permits for any improvements need to be closed out prior to the loan being approved. So there's that additional burden on the building department now, because it's been a trend for the past 5 years, but they are very strict about it now.
Yeah, that's good to know.
So it's put a lot of burden on that office, because you're trying to figure out what happened in the 70s and the 80s,
Good luck with that.
in a lot of cases. So,
Any other questions for me? Thank you.
I just want to comment, I want to thank Sarah, that if we were having a discussion before the meeting started, it's the 100th year of the Memorial Day Parade here in Simsbury, and the banners went up this week. which is always a fabulous event here in town. So I want to thank you for getting that spearheaded with the additional events and everything, but it should be a great event.
And if anyone wants signs, I have them in the back of my car. I've been dropping them off to businesses. So if anyone would like one for their office, let me know.
Great. Okay, so I want to thank Jamie Rabbit for attending this morning, and he's going to give us an update on the Plan of Conservation and Development. Thank you for waking up early.
I have a 9-year-old, I'm up early. Gets me through Hartford quicker. That's my
Yeah.
only missing link. Just to bring you where we are with regards to the POCD. The original POCD had a public hearing in September of 2007, and in October of 2007, the Simsbury Planning Commission made a motion to adopt that 2007 Plan of Conservation and Development with an effective date of November 3rd, 2007. So November 3rd, 2007 is an important date because Connecticut state statute mandates that a town have a current plan updated every 10 years. So 2003, November 3rd, 2017 is the next trigger. So we began the process back in early 2016 to bring on a consultant to assist us in that preparation. We did that in July of 2016. We had a kickoff meeting in September of 2016, and we've been working for, in essence, the last 9 months on the preparation of Plan of Conservation and Development. We do have a first draft. That first draft is available on our webpage. The Planning Commission over the last month and a half have been reviewing that first draft. We had a meeting this past Tuesday where we spent almost 2.5 hours on it. Did not finish. We're going to take that up 2 weeks from now in an attempt to finish that. We are on target to hold a public informational meeting on June 13th. Could be a little bit of slippage. We're evaluating venues right now. We're hoping that Henry James is available for the 13th. In all likelihood, that meeting would occur at 7 p.m. And that would allow the public to come in and comment on the latest draft. We're hoping that we have one more rendition of the first draft before we go to this public forum.
Can I just interrupt you for 1 moment? We have a lot of new commissioners on the
Oh,
board.
okay.
Just so the new members are aware, we were given a survey or a questionnaire, many of the boards and commissioners to answer back when this started. So we did have the opportunity to have input on this and offer our opinions if we weren't able to attend the meeting. So, I'm sorry.
And that's a good point. To back up on public participation, we have done a department head questionnaire, a commission, so all the land use commissions, in essence, all the whether they're ad hoc, chartered commissions, or land use commissions, they all receive questionnaires, department heads receive questionnaires. We did a workshop where we had an interactive kind of point system to try and evaluate what the needs, wants, and issues were in the community. That was lightly attended, so we turned that into a digital activity, and we kept that up for about 4 to 6 weeks on the webpage. And we'll say we started out with 40 responses, and I think an additional 200 came in through those digital responses. In addition to that, we did a random 400-person survey targeting certain demographics within the
Telephone
community.
survey, right?
Telephone survey. So, you know, it wasn't all one age bracket, it wasn't all one location. Literally, we went in and looked at certain demographics for 4 quadrants. We kind of looked at the school system. So some people, we would get phone calls that a survey company called me, then I told them my age, and then they said, no, thank you. And in most instances, it happened to an older segment of the population, so some of their terms were, I'm being discriminated against because I told them my age, and we very carefully explained to them it wasn't, but we had strict parameters within the demographic range, And as they made phone surveys, that population was readily available. If you received a phone call, they left you a message, you could set up an appointment. A lot of people called back. And I found it very interesting working in the community that when we announced we were doing the survey, we received maybe 30 to 40 phone calls from residents who wanted to get on the list to be surveyed. They had an unlisted phone number or they had a cell phone, and they wanted to know how they could give their unlisted number or cell phone number to the department so they could receive a phone call. But again, the survey company was purchasing a list with very specific demographics, which is interesting because your phone numbers are tied to your demographics. So we worked through that. We got great results from that. Those are in the first draft and a discussion on where those things were coming from. So a big component of this has been public outreach. The June 13th meeting will be a secondary attempt for additional public outreach given the formation of the plan. Now, I mentioned November 3rd, 2017 as an important date. By state statute, in essence, the plan needs to be adopted by that. But we have to back up from that more than 65 days or 2 months. Because before we hold our final public hearing on adoption, our plan needs to be available for 65 days on the town's webpage and within our office and at the town clerk. So November, from my perspective, November is coming very quickly because it's not November, it's September. And all of my land use commissions don't meet in August. So it's really July. And we're sitting here in May. So our plan right now is we sit here in May, June 13th, kind of public forum, receive comment, July public hearing on the, so that we can trigger that 65-day time clock.
Jamie, is there going to be a planning commission meeting between now and then where this commission could stand and offer some additional input to the POCD? And the reason I raise this question is that pages, 75 to 83 of the draft that we've received are the economic development, promote economic development section of the POCD. And it's very interesting, and I think needs some input from this commission. Because in section 9.1, page 78, subsection A, it says overall Simsbury will, and there are 2 bullet points at the top there that are very, very much related to the reorganization of this commission. And that is, the first point is to prepare, maintain, and implement a comprehensive economic development strategy, which we do not have as a town. And we have approved, this commission has approved a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen that this duty be codified and included in the brief for the new Economic Development Commission, which will be formed by town charter next year. And so I think it probably would make some sense for this commission to brief the Planning Commission on the roles and responsibilities of the new Economic Development Commission. In addition, on page 80, there's a very interesting comment there in section F, which says, according to the draft of the POCD, that Simsbury will seek grants that support economic development efforts. Now, one of our agenda items today, and part of the document that we're going to submit to the Board of Selectmen in the fall, has to do with the role of the members of this commission and the role of the town manager and the role of the first selectman next year. And so I'm glad we got this draft because I think we had missed this point when we approved these duties and responsibilities at our last meeting, where I think we're almost going to have to add point 8 to that list that will have some reference to the Economic Development Commission's role in seeking grants to support the EDC. And the draft of the job descriptions that we've seen so far from the Personnel Subcommittee for the town manager show no reference whatsoever economic development responsibility. And I doubt that the job description of the new first selectman position is going to have any specific mention of economic development responsibility and duties unless we suggest that. And so I think it probably would be useful to the Planning Commission if it became aware of the fact that this commission is undertaking a very significant project that will have a great deal to do with the implementation of the POCD. And I don't think the Planning Commission is even aware that we're doing this.
They're aware of it. You have to look at the structure of the POCD. The structure of the POCD is giving guidance to the town as an entity. It's not necessarily at the 10,000-foot level. What we are looking to do as the plan evolves is each section may have a table, and I say that because again, we're under extreme time constraints, may have a table under, we'll use the economic development section, that goes to 9.1 goal A, which lists those out, and that would be a subject line on the left. And then there would be 5 or 6 boxes. And under those boxes, there would be separate headings: Zoning Commission, Planning Commission, EDC Commission, First Selectman's Office, Planning Director, and all, Chief of Police and others. And as you got to those bullet items, you would be checking the boxes on the entities that may have some responsibility with obtaining or working on that goal or objective. We're not there yet. It could even be a supplement to an adopted plan, but my goal is not to have to write a letter to the Office of Policy and Management telling them that we missed the November 3rd, 2017 deadline, and can I please have a waiver on this grant application for $1 million, and have to determine whether OPM is going to grant our waiver or not. Your point is extremely well taken. You can write to me directly, you can write to my chairman. I can talk to Bill Rice about if you want to be more formal and have a representative or have a joint meeting. We can do that at a regularly scheduled meeting, but they haven't been able to go through this document as a commission in their entirety, and we're pushing it up against June 13th and mid-July.
Well, and we as a commission need to keep in mind that the task that we've been charged with to provide recommendations to the Board of Selectmen, they can choose to adopt or not adopt our recommendations, and the new Board of Selectmen in December can choose to adopt or not adopt our recommendations for what the new Economic Development Commission would look like. So
It also goes to something larger. It goes to something that's currently happening, that has been happening for years. And I can give an example. Main Street, along with 4 department heads in the First Selectman's office, wrote the Main Street Investment Fund grant, which was an economic development grant through the state of Connecticut. We actually, as you may know, we were awarded over $460,000. So it's not necessarily the commission that would be in charge of writing the grants. A lot of times it's the direction of the First Selectman's office in coordination with Main Street and the department heads that seek, we've evaluated and looked at innovation grants and green grants and all sorts of things. So it's kind of done at a higher level based on what funds are available. We pull in what department heads need to be involved. So it's a little bit, most commissions don't write grants.
With respect, Sarah, I'm not suggesting that we would recommend that the new Economic Development Commission would write grants. But there must be some language in the duties and responsibilities of that new commissioner. I would suggest that there be some language that it would have some role to play in it, to assist in it, to participate in discussions in some way, not necessarily write the grants. However, the point that I'm raising is a very important point, and that is everything is going to change in November because we're not going to have a full-time first selectman. We're not going to have the resources in that office that we presently have. And we are going to have a town manager. And the town needs to recognize that the job descriptions of the town manager and the new first selectman need to codify what their duties and responsibilities are with regard to economic development. If they do not, then we will be rudderless as a community with regard to economic
Oh,
development.
Tom, I don't disagree. I was just, you had mentioned that specific section.
I'm only suggesting that we need to discuss the issue of grant. I'm not saying we're going to write them.
No, I know. I just wanted to clarify though.
Thank
that-
you very much.
From the POCD, take a close look at section 9 and look at kind of the goal objective setup, look at the bullet items, look at the categories and the subcategories, and kind of say if you're the Director of Planning and Community Development, or if you're sitting in Tom Cook's chair or Sarah's chair, if we were applying for a grant, is there language that we can use within this section or other sections to support our grant?
That's hugely important, actually.
When Sarah mentioned the grant, and both engineering and planning, I would say did a significant amount of work, as well as Sarah. And it was nice to go back to the 207 plan and start to pull paragraphs and sections and quotes from there. I've been involved in communities where you are really reaching, I don't want to say making up, but you are really reaching within a POCD to get those things you need to help you support your grant request. And I think there's some good language within our proposed plan to do that. There is a recommendation that you maintain, continue, and steer an economic development strategy plan. And it may be that plan that dictates the role of everyone in economic development within the community. Maybe not the POCD, maybe it's that plan that does that and more clearly defines that. But take it, I'm available if anybody has any comments or suggestions or wants to change. I have a list.
So you don't see the scope of the POCD as indicating who will do what? The POCD plan just says this is what must be done. It's up to other agencies to determine how it will get done. Or not.
It may, POCDs now are headed towards a metric type of avenue. So again, if we looked at page 78, it says, overall, Simsbury will encourage economic development that is consistent with the recommendations of the POCD and that harmonizes with Simsbury's locational advantages, the natural environment, and surrounding structures and uses. And then there's a box that says, prepare, maintain, and implement the comprehensive economic development strategy plan. And again, in my statement, if we were doing matrix, I have to assign some responsibility to that. And then if we're reviewing the plan 5 years from now, I go to that bullet item, I look at whose potential responsibility was that, and did we accomplish it?
When will you be constructing the matrix, Jamie?
In a perfect world, if I had another 12 months in this POCD. But what I'm saying is
It may be a supplement too.
typical POCD is 12 to 24 months in preparation, and we're doing it in 10.
Oh.
And if I may, Jamie, to Tom's point, we're talking about a document that is going to be the document for 10 years. And to the extent a lot can change in 10 years. We might be well advised not to do too much assigning in terms of responsibility.
Especially in light
because
of the fact we have a new form of government
Well, that's
into
right.
place,
Sure.
and you don't
Yeah.
want to
Exactly.
tie your hands,
You want to be a
not knowing
guideline.
what's going to work and what's.
And again, one of the things that, to the extent we've had success recently with our economic development efforts, it's been by virtue of pulling together the right resources for the particular situation we're facing. That's essentially if Sarah and Jamie get calls from potential developers all the time. And then it's a matter of very quickly pulling in the resources that those folks need when we deem that that's a viable development opportunity. Not to say that it isn't important. Of course, it's important to have an economic development commission that's empowered to be part of that. As we were talking, one of the things I think we haven't leveraged in the past is as we submit grants, we have not, at least recently in my recollection, come to this board for letters of support. And that is something where I think there are very obvious ways in which in the grant process the commission should be involved.
Well, aside from the role of this commission, this issue of codifying responsibility for the town manager, or not, and codifying responsibility for the new first selectman, or not, who's going to be a part-time person. with regard to specific duties and responsibilities for economic development activities absolutely must be addressed. And that is the next item on our agenda, so maybe we should move to it.
Sure, and I can, as backup for that, Tom, a lot of this is being driven by the timeline for the recruitment of a town manager. Interviews were done of executive search firms on Tuesday evening. By the next Board of Selectmen meeting, the board will announce the choice of search firms. The process that is likely to happen at that point is something of the deep dive with boards and commissions, the community, department heads, to try to put together both what we feel the appropriate job description for the town manager will be, and also the core competencies necessary for that position, so that the search firm can then put together the advertisements we need and start the recruitment process.
Well,
that definitional process, Tom, I think is going to, by necessity, call into question, where does the economic development responsibility lie? There will have to be, in the course of that, a very, very specific discussion about that.
Okay, that's new news, I think. And so now we're not talking about the new Economic Development Commission, we're talking about the current Economic Development Commission, which you have now informed us that this commission will have an opportunity to be part of the process of the new town manager job description. And again, I would say, please try to make that job description process consist of not only the town manager, but also the new first selectman, because they're going to be like this. So when will we, as a commission, have the opportunity to participate in the job description process for the new town manager and for the new first selectman?
That is probably, I'd say, 4 to 6 weeks away at this point.
You know, back to the original explanation of how this POCD was formulated, I was one of the lucky 400, I guess, that I got called. And
You were the right demographic, Dave.
they ain't put me out of the box, okay? But a very nice young fella said, for the main question, you know, how do you view and I'm not sure how it was worded now, but the overall view of what's needed, or what would you like to see for the town, blah, 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 blah. The big question, you know? And then he read me off 10, 11, 12 different choices. And I said, well, I'm not sure what box you want to put this in. I said, but the biggest problem facing us, I said, is that we should be able to pick up the town of Simsbury and move it to a different state. That's our biggest problem, you know? And the young guy, he laughed. He said, well, I don't know where I can put that. I said, well, you ought to pencil it in somewhere. We can plan and do all these nice things, but we are under this mantle of our state, you know? We ought to remember that, because that is a very big issue in this. It overpowers everything we're talking about here, you know? Just a little bit.
There's a do not call list you could sign up.
For the surveyor or that?
If I could make a quick,
Kristen, given the fact that it's 10 minutes after 8,
Well, I want to make sure Jamie's finished. I don't want to rush the agenda items.
I'm here.
Well,
at
we got
your
a lot of
meeting.
questions.
we're moving off the
you.
agenda quite heavily.
if I could make a quick note, one of the reasons why we have a $50,000 line item in our budget is it is funding Main Street's ability to write grants. And I say that's so that the new members can be a little better aware of what it is that we're going to be discussing. And that is part of what is in the recommendations relative to a rough estimate of what we would be asking the Board of Selectmen to consider as far as future funding. So for $50,000, we're getting some very good grant writing experience. It's probably some of the best money that the town actually spends on an annual basis. Thank you, Sarah. As we've heard, there's a $450,000 grant that is money that we couldn't have expected otherwise had it not been for the grant writing. So that is the reason why we've got 50,000 on our budget line, if you will.
Well, and just to give everybody an update for new members, history with regard to where that $50,000 used to sit. It used to be part of the EDC budget. This year is the first fiscal year that is now part of the first select woman's budget, correct?
Correct.
So Sarah is a 501, works for a 501c3 who works in conjunction with the town, and has done outstanding work in terms of getting the town additional funding and recognition that has boosted this town in rankings with distinctive destinations, things like that, that have helped drive economic growth in Simsbury. So it is money well spent.
And to your point, Chris, also by virtue of the fact that it's not just Sarah, but it's the Main Street Partnership, it ties us into a whole set of resources that we otherwise don't have.
Right.
So it's worked very well.
So do any commissioners have any additional questions
Yeah.
for Jamie?
Yes, I have 5 of them
For Jamie?
for Jamie.
Okay. Regarding the plan of development?
No, I'm
Well-
shifting down now.
Well, let's do that at the end of the agenda then.
Okay.
Are you
Don't-
able to
don't
stay?
leave.
I'm not going
I mean,
anywhere.
all this,
You're at work today.
I'm at work today.
Why, I know.
Tom, can I go home?
Okay. Can you go? No, so there's no additional questions from any board members regarding the plan of development. Okay, so we're going to move to the next agenda item. Thank you very much for that information, by the way.
don't leave.
The discussion of the first select person's role in economic development and possible recommendations by our commission regarding that. So you all received, Mr. Cook kindly sent out the recommendations a couple of days ago, correct? So did everybody have a chance to read through it?
Yep.
So Tom, Frank,
Yes.
get the Toms clear on here. Would you like to present what your proposal is?
Well, yeah, actually, that goes to item 6 on the agenda as well, so the two are kind of conflated as far as discussion is concerned. And in fact, agenda item 5, which is discussion of first select and select woman's role, probably, I would respectfully suggest that just simply be modified discussion of the town manager and the first selectman, or select woman's role in economic development, because they are going to be intermingled. In any case, this 2-page document that I've submitted for consideration touches on some significant points about organization and resource requirements. I think it's self-explanatory in terms of what it covers in the underlined bolded sections, number of members, and we're proposing 7. The reasons are discussed there. An afterthought here was I wonder if it should be even bigger than 7, but 7 probably would be a good place to start. Member qualifications and characteristics are very specific, and those were taken from a review of the qualification and characteristics that are present in other economic development commissions around the country and around the state. And I put a few of my own opinions in there as well. And then the role of town manager and/or the first selectman is very specific. It says the job descriptions of town manager and first select person are still under review by the Board of Selectmen, so we don't know if either of those positions will have codified responsibility for economic development. We do propose the following, and then there are just some general recommendations there. It's very general language. So the town manager job description should include specific language related to economic development, and I point out to this commission that the existing draft of that position says virtually nothing about economic development. It almost suggests that the town manager will have no role in economic development in this community. And that, I think, is very debatable and needs to be discussed. So this is a general recommendation. At minimum, we believe the town manager should have responsibility to assist the NECD in its work, and the Main Street Partnership, for that matter, which the NECD funds, and be available to interact with developers who may want to do business. And the second point is very general, that the first select person's job description should also include specific language relating to interaction and outreach with current and prospective new business owners and to support their efforts to maintain and strengthen their businesses and community. If I were writing those job descriptions, I would be proposing language of that nature. Moving on to the second page, that is potentially controversial. the role of the Main Street Partnership and Farmington Valley Visitors, we strongly suggest that the NECD should continue to have a close working relationship with the Main Street Partnership and the Farmington Valley Visitors. This should involve active communications from time to time. However, we propose that the current practice of having these two organizations do monthly status reports should be changed to brief bi-monthly reports. This will result in more time for the NECD to deal with its expanded duties and responsibilities. So that might be something that needs discussion. And then probably the most controversial section of this proposal is resources needed by the NECD. We, at our last meeting, discussed and revised and ultimately approved a very significant list of duties and responsibilities which could not possibly be accomplished by a volunteer board such as this one. And therefore, if we're going to continue to support that list, very robust list of duties and responsibilities, then we have to recommend to the Board of Selectmen that resources be provided in order to accomplish the work. Now, I did this pretty much using my own business experience, and I just want to read part of this. After the list of responsibilities, which we've already discussed in detail, accordingly, this is the middle of the section, accordingly, it seems clear that the current financial and human resources available to the NEDC will be inadequate, since the responsibilities of that new commission are significantly greater in number and complexity than the responsibilities of previous commissions. And so we suggest the new Board of Selectmen should consider providing the following resources for NECD during the first year of its existence. 1, a staff person, 0.25 full-time equivalent, dedicated to the work of NEDC, and that has been a point of contention in my discussions with First Selectwoman, that it's been difficult for this commission in its current format to go to town staff and say, do this and do that, because they're busy. And there's no understanding that town staff has a duty and responsibility to respond to requests.
Actually, there's a provision in the charter of town, to be clear, that says that the only people who can give directions to town staff are the first select woman and directors. It is a breach of the charter.
The current charter, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so
And the new charter.
And the new charter as well.
It was not modified for the new
Now,
charter.
that doesn't mean that somebody couldn't be, if the funding were available, dedicated in that way. And certainly, I've spent an awful lot of time on it. I think as we transition to the new form of government, there will, this is a guess, there's currently I currently have a deputy who's most likely going to end up being an assistant town manager when all this is done. But that would be a person who I think would end up staffing this commission. And
Is that official?
Excuse me, Dave?
That you're going to be the assistant town manager?
There's a whole lot of planning yet to do.
Tom, if we could just state this.
That's why a lot of what Tom's
that's
talking about, we're lucky we're even here, because we got wiped out early.
Right, Tom, I'm just saying that,
Sure.
there will most likely be a resource dedicated to it. I don't know whether there will be, no.
Yeah, that's the key word, dedicated. And as long as there's an understanding about that, then the suggestion here is, and I just put a number on it, I pulled it out of the air, including benefits and other things. And then secondly, a consultant for strategic planning in year one, $50,000. And I feel very strongly about that because the plan of conservation and development is now specifically mentioning that responsibility, which is taken from state statute. We have put it as number one on our list of duties and responsibilities. And the assumption would be when the new Economic Development Commission is formed, it's going to be formed of volunteers, most of whom are going to be working, and maybe only a few of whom, if any, might have the skill set required to prepare a strategic development.
Strategic plan will require a consultant.
And so that's why to the commission, I'm saying, why I think it's essential that we propose that, so that it becomes part of the budget at some point. It won't be part of the budget in the coming year. And then maintenance of the current budget to support the Main Street Partnership. I couldn't remember what it was when I did this. I just took
That's
this.
correct.
Is
It's
that
50.
correct? So that's it, Madam Chairman.
Okay, I have we're going to open it up for discussion. I do want to start with a few comments that maybe start the discussion. With regard to number of members and how it's appointed, currently it's appointed by the town committees, Republican and Democrat. And I don't know if that is written in the charter, and forgive me for not knowing that, but I don't know if we need language in here to encourage independent representation on this commission as well, so it's not just along party lines, because there's a lot of independent registered voters in the town of Simsbury that can provide a lot of
Good point.
volunteer.
Very good.
So, that being one point. The other that I had was with regard to the preparing of the strategic plan. I think we need to include some language in there that it's in partnership with the Board of Selectmen and the town manager, the Board of Selectmen, because we've been talking for a number of years about, and I'm going to use my business terms, having a mission statement for the town of Simsbury with regard to economic development. And that needs to be something, and this came out during the Economic Development Task Force, that needs to be something that is lived and breathed by everybody in this building. Every employee, every representative of the town needs to understand what the mission statement is for economic development and do their jobs with that in mind, and understand that we're here to service the people who are not only living in this town but potentially looking to open a business in this town. So I think that needs to be something that's a partnership between the Board of Selectmen. So because we don't have the ability to direct employees on how to behave or act or speak on behalf of that we need that partnership.
I just made a note, Kristen, on what we approved in April. I'm going to modify that document to include that language, this in partnership idea for duty and responsibility number one. I couldn't agree more, and I think the language actually needs to be changed to reflect that. As far as the comment about independence, unaffiliated, or political affiliation in general as a list of member qualification and characteristics, I just for one would applaud you for bringing that up, because I think it's a superb point, and I'd like to make a modification to that effect.
I have one other modification that I'd like for discussion. I mean, this is all up for discussion, is I think that based on the new economic development potential responsibilities, if they're adopted by the new Board of Selectmen, I'm just going to throw it out there. I think our commission, if we are truly charged with these responsibilities, needs to meet more than once a month. And there's no way to accomplish having presentations, including presentations from developers, doing our business, having special meetings, having special committees in an hour and a half once a month.
You are so right.
Agree. You can't get much done.
You are so right.
I'm just saying that, and I'm saying that because I'm willing to continue to serve doing that, but I think it's a daunting task, and we all recognize that, and there is no way we can truly be an effective commission for an hour and a half on a Thursday morning.
You're right.
Once a
10
month.
times a year.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I
So
agree.
those are my points of discussion on here. So I want to open it up, and I think it's easier if we just go from one side to the other on the table so everybody's heard. So I'll start with my left, Dave.
No,
Thank
go
you.
the other way.
No, I'm going that Dave.
The left one.
The left Dave.
The
farthest left.
The red one.
Cleanup.
The farthest left, but not
It's
in
not necessarily
thinking.
an accurate description of my political.
No, I said not thinking.
Hard left, Dave.
Yeah. I believe that an odd number of members would be a good thing, as if you have an even number, there are instances where it could be an even vote, and that can lead to paralysis, so having an odd number would be a good idea. I think that 9 is perhaps a bit too unwieldy, and it can make for a difficult ability to reach a quorum at times, so I'm definitely in support of the number 7. I also believe that we should encourage unaffiliated membership on the board. I will note that it can be at times somewhat difficult to obtain volunteers from unaffiliated voters just because it requires the Board of Selectmen to then actually meet and interview with proposed unaffiliated members, and that can take quite some time to fill that spot. Nonetheless, I think that the more that this body appears as a nonpartisan organization that is dedicated to the economic well-being of the town, the better. I also would suggest that membership of the commission have some contact or some affiliation with, for instance, the Tourism Commission, with the Historic Society, because those two entities are potential economic drivers for this town, and having an affiliation and or a contact with those entities would actually be part of answering our charge. I would also support the modification of the strategic plan being done in partnership with the Board of Selectmen, so I would support that language. I am in general in support with what is being proposed as far as the job descriptions for both town manager and first select person. I think that it would be wise to at least have some mention of that in the description so that future job searches and or elections can actually address that particular issue. If it is silent, then generally speaking, it's not talked about, and that's not a good thing. And I would also support the proposed resources. We won't make it in this budget, but it would be good to have in the following budget. That is, of course, contingent on actually having the money available. And that is not going to be a sure thing, given what we're encountering as far as headwinds from Hartford is concerned. Those are my comments. Thank you, Madam
I just
Chair.
would like to respond to those comments as far as, trying to keep track of the comments, because everybody's got some really good input here, and I just want to suggest responses to them. In this particular case, I love the idea of, well, not only incorporating a section in here about bipartisanship, political affiliation, use of independence and so forth, but I also want to add, if for the draft purposes next time around, a section that specifically comments about interaction with other agencies. Because I personally hadn't thought of that when I put this together, but it's a very, very good comment that the plan of organization really should reflect that this commission operates together with other agencies. And I don't have that in the duties and responsibilities, and I don't have it in this, and it should be there. And I would specifically mention those agencies in particular that are potential economic development drivers, specifically tourism and historical society. There might be others, I don't know.
Well, you might have to say it's not limited, but including.
Yeah.
You want to keep it open-ended.
Thank you very much.
And I think it's more of a collaboration, if anything.
Sure it is.
Yes.
Thank you, Dave.
Next.
Hi, I know as a very, very new member of this commission, my comments are going to be very brief, but if economic development isn't part of the new town manager's job description and the first selectman's job description, I don't see how we as an organization can be as effective as we know we need to be, and as integral a part in this community as we need to be. I mean, it's where it's at. It's what Sarah's doing. It's what's going to make this town stay as viable and feasible as it is right now. Assuming that we get some budget relief, assuming that the state gets some way to make the budget happen without killing all of the state residents. Economic development and getting these empty buildings that are around town and empty spaces that can be developed, that's where it's at, and that's supreme. I mean, that's why I joined this commission, or looked to join this commission, is to help keep Simsbury a viable community. So whatever we need to do, however we need to get that message across to everyone, that the new Economic Development Commission is important, and it needs to be funded, it needs to be looked at as a very significant resource to this town. I think the budget is very nominal that you're looking for, but I understand also what the economic situation is. I think Sarah needs to have a decent budget to do the job that she does. And
Main Street has not had an increase in budget in
Since I've been.
Several years, and
Several-
and we're, again, understanding the dynamics, we're not looking for that.
No, but I'm just saying, just as a comment, she's done great work with no increase in budget
It's-
for a number of years.
it's those things that will help drive everything else that we as a town want to do. It's the resources that provide the outreach. I mean, I can use an example from my own church. Outreach has been significantly increasing year after year after year, and all of a sudden, it's really making a big impact. And that's what we're doing, and that's what we need to continue to do.
Well, I think, and to comment, I think the town needs to, not that we've been short-sighted, but the amount of grand list growth that we get from economic development more than outweighs the cost associated with attempting to do that. So it's a long-term commitment and a long-term investment in the economic health of this community. And, the first couple of years, it might be painful for that expenditure because development doesn't happen overnight. But it has to be a long-term strategic plan and investment in this town. And Jay's been speaking about that for a couple of years. And, I couldn't be in more of agreement, but he's trying to get there, but that's, it has to, we can't look at it from a budget cycle to budget cycle because that's not how economic growth happens.
Well, just to respond to that comment, and this is a comment to Tom Cook, I'm a little uncomfortable that we're going to propose a new Economic Development Commission, duties, responsibilities, and so forth, and funding, but not for next year, 2018. Now, do we really, as a town, want to lose a whole year of development activity because of budget problems now, this being one of the... So the question is this: is there any flexibility at all in the line items, not in the total amount, in the line items of the 2018 budget proposal that can be modified legally to cut one thing in one area in order to provide a budget for economic development, including some of these resources for 2018? Because we don't want to lose. We don't want to start this in 2019.
The answer is sure. I mean, at this point in time, the Board of Finance, the Board of Selectmen can recommend anything. They could, if they decided they needed to cut they really had to cut 70,000 out of what they have and move it to economic development, they'd make a recommendation like that if they supported it. Now, I think the chances of that happening are nil. That said, everything that's been said here is, again, in a prior life, I had the good fortune to be in the telecommunications industry in the early 2000s when the bottom fell out of the market. And I went from, we had 10,000 employees internationally, and by the time I was done with the downsizes, we had 4,000. And I still don't sleep well. But one of the important things, even in a downturn like that, is you've got to keep your future alive. You just have to do it. So there is this may end up being, Tom, a very good candidate for a supplemental appropriation from the Board of Finance in the new year.
I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I know there's other people who need to comment on this, but I don't know if there would be any harm in this commission in light of the new POCD and our development of the new recommendations for the new Economic Development Commission to recommend to the Board of Selectmen in a formal way that we get a strategic plan in place and hire a consultant to get an economic plan in place for the town, because if we've got a new form of government and we've got a focus on economic development, and the only way to get a mission statement or a strategic plan in place is to hire a consultant to get that done, then do we as a board recommend that that needs to happen by 2018?
Yeah.
As a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen? I mean, because
starts-
the $50,000 of Simsbury Main Street is already in the budget, okay? So what's the next piece of it? We really don't want to hire a staff person because we don't know what we're doing yet, okay? We don't have a goal. We don't have a mission. So do we recommend formally so it gets on the agenda for the Board of Selectmen and it becomes a discussion point?
That's the thing. I think you're starting a conversation that needs to happen, and as long as everyone agrees that there's a problem that needs a solution, then I think you've won. It's just a matter of when at that point and how.
What would the process then be to do that? Because
We would need to
I,
make-
for one, responding to that comment, I would wholeheartedly support approaching the Board of Selectmen to get earmarked resources for 2018, not wait until 19. So how would we do that?
Well, I think
We would need to make a motion, and we'd have to second it, and we would have to vote. But before we do that, I would like to suggest that we continue to hear the rest of the recommendations from everybody. I'm sorry, I interjected that, and then we make all of our motions for amendments at the same time, so we can keep track of things.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Because everybody,
Yes.
so, are you finished?
There was one other point.
Okay.
The resources, the outreach, I think the meeting more than one time a month, you know, I'm gonna shoot my own self in the foot saying.
I did.
I don't know how you can get from here to there in an hour and a half, once a month. You can't.
And I would add, I definitely support that as well.
So, Mr. Balboni?
I'll be very brief because I was here when the Indians were here. Okay?
Okay.
I think that, just like the last time we had the vote, I abstained because the big gorilla in the room is the new, outside of the state, is the new form of government that's going to be implemented come November. We survived by getting into the charter, which was a lot, you deserve a lot of credit for that too. But the issue to try to do everything that's going around here, I just think is premature. I think we've got problems right now that we can face and we can actually do things about, because our primary job or task is to increase and improve the grand list, either by keeping what we got or by getting new stuff in here. So that's where I stand. Next.
Okay.
I'm still very new, so I'm going to just kind of be very short and brief. I honestly, just from what I'm hearing and trying to understand the history, it sounds like the EDC still needs a seat at the table. It seems like we're at the children's table. I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's the feeling I'm getting. And so I agree with Kevin's point on putting a line item in the job descriptions, both in the town manager and the first. We need to be there. We need to have that presence. We need to have that approach. We need to be on their agendas or on in their thought process. Agree meeting more than once a month. I'm all about getting things done. I don't like this taking. The only way action speaks louder than words, and that's the way I like to work with. And again, I agree with the opening up to other parties and independents. Those make sense.
Okay. Do you have additional comments?
I do not.
Okay, Jay?
Yeah, no, I think this was a good conversation today. I guess a couple of things to think about. So we talked a little bit about kind of the town manager and the new kind of first selectman and what the rules will be. I think a lot of it is that we still don't really understand what a first selectman does once there is a town manager. I mean, I kind of always thought of it as, you know, the town manager's the COO, maybe also president, and your first selectman is the CEO. So they typically don't have functional responsibilities, but they're the vision people. So that's, you know, kind of that's a big part of the role and that part of the economic development process. That's just another way of saying, you know, the things that we laid out, we laid out lots of things. So I think we would probably be relying on the town manager for certain things and the first selectman for other things. And then with respect, to the buy itself, at one point in time, we had talked about having subcommittees because we were going to be tackling more than what this commission had previously decided to do. To the extent we're really doing that, I hesitate to suggest it, but does 9 make more sense if we're having subcommittees of maybe 3 people each that are really doing deep dives into things? And if we're meeting more than once, is it, how does that work? Do we meet 9 people together once a month and then subcommittees an additional once or twice a month? Are those subcommittee meetings kind of open meetings like this one is, or can 3 people go to a room in the library and knock stuff out?
You have to notice it.
You have to notice it.
Okay.
It can be done, but yeah, it's a.
You can't meet at Starbucks just because on Tuesday and not notice it. 2 of you could, but 3 of you can't, right? Not even.
No, not anymore.
Yeah.
Not
So you
anymore.
can't.
No one can meet.
If you're fulfilling a formal function
Right.
of the commission.
You cannot.
If
You
it's-
cannot meet.
Yeah, right. If it's
Without
a-
notice.
If it's a subject matter that would be before the commission, no.
But you can do
If
what Jake
it's,
suggested.
planning a birthday party, you're all set.
Right.
Okay, yeah. So no, I agree. Yeah, I agree with a lot of the comments that that everyone shared today. I thought it was great. I thought it was very helpful. Yeah, the only thing I would reluctantly suggest is, I know 9 could be an unwieldy number.
The chairs are too big at the table to
Yeah,
sit on.
Yeah, we're at the children's table. So there's not much room, right? So
Yes.
so that's I don't know that we need to kind of discuss that point today, debate it today, but something to perhaps keep in mind. And if we kind of do decide to go the subcommittee route, maybe it makes sense. If it doesn't, then clearly not. But yeah, that was the only other thing I wanted to
Okay,
add.
I'd like
Sarah
to,
had a question?
No, actually,
Or
can I
com-
just, something that's missing in the document, just food for thought, having worked with lots of different iterations of EDCs and EDAs across the state. Right now, there's a lot of make, review, prepare, and if you want to be more active, I would say you have to have something that's more active. And one place where you guys, I think, could be incredibly effective and help the town is through advocacy of issues, whether it be, Jay, we talked about, the email that you sent around, but things like that, what's happening with legislation, what's pending. Main Street and tourism right now are in conversations because we have direct flights from Bradley to Ireland. And
I was on it.
yeah, but
On Sunday.
And what are the implications, though, of how can we make that benefit Simsbury and Main Street and the town? And we're all doing a ton of in-depth, Jamie, we're working with people on a one-on-one basis, working with business owners, working with property owners, and where you guys could really help us and be very effective is kind of that next level, the state level, the federal level, advocating for things,
I'd
tying
second
things
that. An
together.
advocacy role is very important in
Yeah.
this group.
Okay, well-
I want you guys to speak.
is that it?
Now we have to meet 3 times a month.
Is that it, Sarah?
We're talking about that.
Okay, so now we have 2 documents here to deal with in terms of amendments, and so I'd like to start the amendment discussion, starting with the duties and responsibilities document approved by the EDC on April 13th, 2017. And then I'd like to make a second motion regarding the second thing. So I'm going to move that the list of duties and responsibilities approved by the EDC on April 13th, 2017 be modified to include 2 additional points. One, the point that was just raised by Sarah, that it will be part of this commission's responsibility to advocate in various places about issues that could affect economic development. And I'll
get the words just right. So that's one change to this list approved on the 13th. And the other thing is other part of that motion would be to modify the language to ensure that it reflects interagency cooperation. So that's a motion.
Do I have a second on that or comments?
I'll second.
Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Well, I don't know if I'm for it or against it, because I don't think we should be taking this thing in pieces. I think we should have a whole package here and then vote on the total. So I'll abstain.
Okay, so now as far as this plan of organization and resource requirements, I'd like to move that the draft that is before this commission be modified in the following way. First, that a new section be added relating to meeting frequency, which will indicate a proposal that this commission should meet not once a month, but twice a month in order to get its work done. The second part of this motion will be to modify this to add a section regarding political affiliation of membership, which reflects our view that it should be a bipartisan commission and should definitely include unaffiliated members. And thirdly,
There's actually
Partnership
four.
with the.
yeah, the third is to add a section here. Well, I had a section here about interactions with other agencies and specifically tourism and historical society, but frankly, I believe that belongs to duties and responsibilities.
Which we just modified.
Which we just modified. So I would propose making those two changes, meeting frequency and political affiliation.
I'd like to modify that motion.
Please do.
To include on the second page, to prepare a strategic plan in partnership with the Board of Selectmen, and to add a seventh responsibility of advocacy of issues at the state and federal level.
Okay, that will be in both sections then, both the duties and responsibilities and this partnership.
If I could suggest that the duties and responsibilities, number one, be prepare a strategic plan for economic development and present it to the Board of Selectmen in collaboration with the town manager and Board of Selectmen to provide strategic guidelines for economic development that is both feasible and desirable for the town of Simsbury.
Okay, well, let's come back to that then, because we just voted on modifications to the duties and responsibilities, so we'll come back to that. We have a motion about, an amended motion about modifications to the plan of organization and resource development. I make
Right.
that motion.
Is there a second?
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
I abstain with the gorilla till he gets here.
Okay.
Now, coming back to the...
Sorry, just so I'm clear, what were the three, I had the meeting frequency of 2 times, the political affiliation issue.
Prepare a strategic plan in partnership with
With the Board of Selectmen.
In collaboration with the town manager and the Board of Selectmen.
Oh,
And the advocacy.
Advocate in both state and federal forums economic development issues for the town of
no,
Simsbury.
we already voted on that for
Right.
the duties and
That one was already
responsibilities.
done, that's now your 7th duty, advocate in various forums on economic development issues, and then I had 8 was the interagency cooperation.
Right, but we need to modify this because if the duties and responsibilities are summarized in this second page of this document, they
Whatever
need to be
modifications were
reflected.
made
Right.
in the duties and
Right.
responsibilities will be reflected in this
That's
document.
right,
Right.
yeah, right, so that's, okay.
So we modified the April 13th and we voted on that and agreed, but it needs to be modified in the summary.
It will be.
Move for the modification of the summary as we have amended it.
Okay, so we think we know what the motion is. Do I have a second?
Well, I made the motion, so
Well,
David.
okay, then I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I abstain.
You abstain. Okay. So are we all set with that then? Thank you for your hard work on that.
You're welcome.
As
You're very
always.
welcome. before we adjourn, if that's where we're headed.
Well, I want to open it up for any new business or additional comments before.
Well, okay, one additional comment then. I get the sense of our earlier conversation that this commission believes, although we didn't vote on it, there was a sense that this commission feels that it would be a responsible and valuable thing to do to officially do two things. One of them would be to advocate for a budget adjustment in 2018 to provide resources to implement these plans. And the other official thing would be to advocate for heavy participation in the decision process on job descriptions for first selectman and town manager. So, Chris, I'm just wondering, is there some process that we should agree
Well,
on?
we would need someone to make a motion. I think that if we're going to make a recommendation regarding strategic economic development plan, that I think it should be specific with regard to hiring a consultant, recommending to the Board of Selectmen that they hire a consultant for 2018 to have a strategic plan in place. But that's my opinion. Someone needs to make a motion with regard to specifically that item, and we can vote on it.
I will move that we recommend to the Board of Selectmen that a consultant be hired for the creation and implementation of an economic strategic plan for both the Economic Development Commission and the town of Simsbury.
Second.
Could you put, just a friendly amendment, could you put a time dimension on that?
For 2018,
For,
for the 2018.
In early
budget.
2018, or in the 2018 budget?
Right, in the 2018 budget. Friendly amendment accepted.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Till the new government's formed, I abstain.
Okay.
And the second thing?
On the subject of participation in the job description process, and I don't know if this requires a motion, but I'll,
When we're talking about the job description process,
Yes.
it is, you all will be invited to participate in the process for providing comments about what you all feel the town manager should do.
do we as a committee
We
be
can write
involved,
I can write a letter.
or is it chairperson?
I don't think we need to make a motion. I can write a letter.
Frankly, I think there will be opportunity for everybody individually to
To write a letter.
right to do that, or to participate in one form or another. Obviously, helpful to have a letter from the chair of the commission.
So the letter you have in mind is that, as our chairperson, your letter would make the Board of Selectmen, Chris Kelly, who's in charge of this process, aware that this commission wishes to participate in that process. I think that's a wonderful idea.
That's the way to go.
I would do a
That's the way to
letter.
go, and I can
Yeah.
certainly.
'Cause I don't think we need a motion for that.
I'm directly involved in the process too,
Right.
so I ignore this at my peril.
You're not gonna put that as a motion, because I'd vote for that.
Wait, we had the first.
I move to authorize the chair to communicate with the Board of Selectmen.
That's the first time in about 30.
What's that? I second that motion.
To communicate with the Board of Selectmen the Commission's desire to be involved in the formation of the duties and responsibilities of town manager and possibly first selectman.
Second.
I have a second?
Yes.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, is there any additional,
And the temple was rent.
any additional new business?
Yeah, I wanna ask Jeremy a few questions here.
Jamie,
Jamie.
Sorry,
Does this
sorry
need to be an
about
offline discussion, or is it a commission discussion?
have a good day at work. Thank you.
I gotta go.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks, guys.
Okay,
that. May I?
absolutely.
Jamie, I'm sorry, I got your name mixed up. I have 5 questions, but it's all around actions that's going on right now, okay? If you can update us, I'd appreciate it. And I'll just read them down, then you can pick them any way you want. What's the status on the Berkshire Bank? What's the status on the Dunkin' Donut issue for Antonio's? What's the, and I think I know the answer to this third one, the Climax Road situation, I guess that was voted down, and I believe it's now in court, but I'd like a ratification on that. And the last, is there any information on the unsigned house?
That was 4.
You didn't ask the other
Oh,
one.
4. I gave you 4.
Okay.
Well, you know, 4 comes after 3, right?
With regards to the Berkshire Bank, that bank has been constructed as a shell. We are
I can't hear you, sir.
The bank has been constructed as a shell. We do not have a definitive date from Berkshire Bank for retrofit and move-in date. We're still, it's our understanding, they still intend to move forward with that project.
That's owned by Hoffman, right?
We have not been advised that they are not coming to town.
But did they give a time frame or anything like that?
We have been advised that they have.
The
that they are
buildings-
Still coming to town with
Okay.
no timeframe.
The building is owned by Hoffman, right?
No, the property,
Or the property?
property that's owned by
It's a
Hoffman.
land lease.
Next.
You asked me if I know when they are coming.
Right.
No, I do not,
No, you
but they
don't.
are still committed to this community.
Could you
With
find out?
regards- What?
There's
There's
nothing-
there's no new news.
Until they say when they're coming, we're just at their mercy right now.
If I knew, I would tell you.
Right.
Yeah, you would share the
In
information.
regards to Dunkin' Donuts, we have had multiple discussions with the potential leasee and/or new owner of property associated with the development of a Dunkin' Donuts in the northern portion of town on land controlled by Mr. Antonio. That is still a work in progress.
What's the timetable on it? That's been going on for over a year, I think.
When someone complies with the town's zoning regulations, we can permit that project.
Why is he out of compliance? Can you tell us that?
We don't have an application before us, but the plans.
You've had discussions
The
though, right?
plans that were put in front of our department did not comply with the town zoning regulations.
Okay.
Oh, that's an unacceptable answer. Go ahead. We're trying to get these things to move. That's what this commission's all
They were
about.
given options to have their plan comply or attempt to amend the regulations. They have chosen to amend,
So
attempt
should
to
this,
choose
should
to
this
amend the
applicant,
regs.
should this potential applicant go talk to the first select person? Is that what you're suggesting?
Already has.
And what was her response?
The department has told you what your options are. You can supply
Well,
a
Jerry,
plan. You can, we have an existing zoning code.
I understand.
And
Look, hey, I'm
applicants
not a
can
child, I
comply,
understand.
Or we work with everyone who comes into our
But you
office.
don't work very fast sometimes. And that guy's
We
been going on
we have
for a
rules
year.
that need to be
I
followed.
cannot, when someone comes into my office or into the town hall with regards to discussions on development, we can tell them what the components of the regulations say. I cannot control the private sector's time frame.
Mr. Planner, are you aware of the Cumberland Farm project?
Yes.
Do you know how that came to be? Because the planner was giving us the same jazz before you. We went to the press, got an article in the press, and all of a sudden, like magic, he came in and it all happened. So these things can be moved.
Wait.
You're not asking him to violate the zoning.
No, no, of
Okay,
course
then,
not.
then as
Of
long as
course
you're not asking him to
Of
do
course
that,
not.
then he's handling it
He's
the right
answering
way.
my
Go to the
question.
next point,
Yeah,
please.
this is,
What's the next update?
What is
Thank
the
you.
next update?
The next one was Climax Road. That was a proposed 830G subdivision application. That was denied by the planning commission and that is under appeal. So that'll go to the Connecticut Superior Court. We have no time frame yet on that case.
It's not in court yet, right?
No.
The appeal has been filed. We have not even filed briefs yet. So, with regards to the Ensign Bickford House, it's my understanding that they were accepting bids, that bid process may have ended and there is the potential acquisition. But I do not have formal confirmation of who the new owners may be.
Thank you.
As long as we're on updates, could you briefly update us on the Big Y situation?
Big Y is still the owner of the property. They are committed to the community, but they do not have a start date.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
Move to adjourn.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
See you next month.
Or sooner.
That wasn't voted on.